This study, The Evangelical Attitudes Toward Israel and the Peace Process, was a study that we conducted in September of this year. The goal was to learn the views of evangelicals, specifically those with evangelical beliefs. And to define evangelical beliefs, we utilized a definition that Lifeway Research developed with the National Association of Evangelicals 2 years ago. 4 questions, 4 statements are provided in the survey, and respondents are asked if they strongly agree, somewhat disagree, or strongly disagree with each. And if somebody strongly agrees with all 4 statements, we categorize them as having evangelical beliefs. The 4 statements involve the authority of the Bible for that person's beliefs, believing that Jesus' death on the cross is the only remedy for our sin, trusting in Christ alone for salvation, and saying it's important for them personally to encourage non-Christians to trust in Jesus Christ. Obtaining a representative sample was a high priority for this survey, and we utilized the GFK Knowledge Panel to do that. The Knowledge Panel is a probability-based panel that is representative of the U.S. population, and all panel members were initially chosen by random selection by telephone and address. Residential addresses. So from that panel, we then screened using the evangelical beliefs questions so that we then interviewed 2,002 Americans who have evangelical beliefs. And that gives us a margin of sampling error of plus or minus 2.7% at the 95% confidence interval. With about 40 questions on the survey, I'm just going to highlight just a few of the big hitter items and encourage you to look in the packet. The entire report's in there. There's a news story by Bob Smetana that hits a few more highlights as well. A number of the questions on the survey address support for Israel from evangelicals. And kind of the one I'll lead off with is that more than 3 out of 4 Americans with evangelical beliefs agree that Christians should support Jewish people's right to live in the sovereign state of Israel. That's a high level of support, and several of the other questions give us some insights onto where that comes from. Another of the questions, we see that more than 2/3 of evangelicals agree that Jewish people have a historic right to the land of Israel. So there's history in their minds when they think about the nation. Also, when we simply ask them their perception of the country of Israel today, we see that 2 out of 3 have a positive perception of the nation. Less than 10% have a negative perception. There is about a quarter of evangelicals that really are not sure. And we'll see that persisting through a number of the other questions, that some are disengaged. Those who understand evangelicals will not be surprised that a number of biblical aspects are seen in their support for Israel. In fact, when we asked them about their perception of the nation itself, we followed up by asking why. Where does that come from? And almost half of them, the number one response was, the Bible is the most influential thing in my thinking about the nation of Israel today. The next highest thing is a third that size, and that's the media shaping their opinions, and the rest of the opinions are pretty small. We also see a biblical connection in that evangelicals recognize prophecy fulfilled. 8 out of 10 say that the modern rebirth of the state of Israel in 1948 was the fulfillment of prophecy. We also see that the exact same number, 8 out of 10, agree that God's promise to Abraham and his descendants of the land was for all time. And so some of those connections are things that evangelicals are being influenced by as they look at things that happen today. Again, seeing a biblical connection for evangelicals is not going to be surprising. So, but here we've documented it probably better than any study has before because of this large sampling of evangelicals. 2 noteworthy things that may not have been expected. One is we're seeing some large age differences on a number of the questions. On just those perceptions of Israel overall, we see almost a 20% difference between millennials and those age 65 plus of being less positive, and most of them are shifting over to being not sure about their opinions of the nation itself. We also asked about support, and we see an age difference there. let me show you the question first. When we asked about support for the existence, security, and prosperity of the state of Israel, we gave two options for what that support could be. One is no matter what Israel does, and the other is support, but I don't feel the need to support everything that the nation does today. And the largest response, 4 out of 10, indicated the latter, that there are some qualifications to not supporting everything the nation does while still supporting their existence and their prosperity. But we also see that about a third of evangelicals are really have no strong views on what is occurring in the nation today. And as we look at that by age group, first of all, we see that the support, if we combine the numbers, 58% of millennials are showing support for the nation, so it's still a majority. Age 65 plus, it's 77%. So almost a 20% difference in saying I support the existence and prosperity of the nation of Israel. And they're not jumping down to being against Israel. Instead, it really is having no strong views. 4 out of 10 millennials have no strong views about the nation of Israel today. Millennials are not against Israel, but they're not engaged. The other noteworthy finding is that we see the majority of evangelicals agree that Christians should do more to love and care for the Palestinian people. That's often not a narrative that we hear frequently, either in the media or sometimes even in church circles. But that's something that also persists when we look at that by age group. Younger evangelicals would agree with that even more. 2/3 of them are agreeing that Christians should be doing more to love and care for Palestinian people. So those are just a few of the highlights. I think that the findings will be very interesting to anyone that's following Israel on a regular basis. But because this focuses on evangelicals, those who follow evangelicals will be very interested in the findings because this documents their thoughts better than we feel any study has to this date.